Hello, my name is Jennifer Kelly. I am a solicitor at Field Fisher, specialising in personal injury. With me today I have Alan Hiscox, Director of Safety at the British Horse Society, who was also a member of the Mounted Police for several years, and Nathan Tavares KC, barrister at Outer Temple, who specialises in personal injury. We're very soon approaching the 2-year anniversary of the changes to the Highway Code. Alan, do you want to tell us some more about that?
The Highway Code, it was open to interpretation. It asked drivers to pass horses wide and slow. Well, what does that mean? One driver might say wide is different to another driver. So we wanted some specifics brought in. So that's why the 10 miles an hour maximum speed and the 2 metres distance to pass were discussed and actually brought in. Last year, 2023, were 3,400 incidents reported to the British Horse Society involving horses. 60 horses were killed, 88 horses were injured. So, there's a lot of work to be done, but it was significant.
Can you tell us a little bit about how horses behave on the roads and some of the dangers with them as a flight animal?
Well, one of the ways that we talk to drivers and try and get them to understand that horses are flight animals is that we mentioned the brains at work. So there's the driver brain, there's the rider brain, but don't forget the horse's brain. Also, it could well react to something on the side of the road, like a piece of paper fluttering out or a bird flying out of a bush. And even as a rider of a police horse, I can tell you that police horses are still flight animals. They might only react by a movement of an ear or a movement of a muscle, but they always react.
And also what's very interesting is not only this guidance for passing a horse, but if it isn't safe to pass, that the driver is to wait until they find an opportunity when it is.
Yeah, and that's again going back to the responsibility of riders. We're saying them to be aware, look behind. If there's a car behind and they can't make those clearances, perhaps turn into a gate or trot on to the next available passing space. But yeah, it's very important again that we're saying to drivers, if they can't meet those clearances, then wait behind the horse until they can.
Nathan, are road traffic collisions involving horses particularly difficult to run?
Yeah, I would say they're a bit more challenging because you've got this third dimension, which is an unpredictable horse. I know some judges I've been in front of think that anybody gets on a horse is asking for trouble and it's always going to be their fault. But the reality is that you've got to assess what the driver's done and what the rider's done in the context of, again, the reasonable person in that situation. And you're going to have experts with different views about what good practice is. Not so much with drivers, because we all know really what good driving is about, but with horsemanship that's a little bit more varied. A client of mine who was out on a hack on local roads, and she had to cross a B road, and a car stopped to allow her and her friend to cross on their horses, and as soon as they had passed in front of the car accelerated away hard and frightened the horses such that my client's horse bolted. And she was thrown, sustaining very serious head injuries again. The claim was for negligence of the driver, but she couldn't trace the driver, so she had to bring a claim against the Motor Insurers Bureau under what's called the Untraced Drivers Agreement. Fortunately, the police were called to the scene immediately, and they took witness statements from the friend who'd witnessed the events and from some other witnesses who'd seen the way the claimant had fallen and the state the horse was in when it was captured. It was very panicked. And that was the main evidence in the case, which forced the Motor Insurers Bureau to pay out for the untraced driver, and she recovered several £1 million in damages.
It might be that primary liability is with the driver, but the rider, as Alan has just said, has responsibility. So as with any personal injury claim, there can be an element of what's known as contributory negligence on the part of the injured person.
Yes, it was alleged in our case. It was suggested that rather than gather the horse in once it started to bolt, the client had actually aggravated the situation by screaming and yelling, which was a panicked response. And there were some other aspects of how she dealt with the situation which were alleged to be negligent. We had evidence from an equestrian expert who told the court what you would expect an averagely competent rider to do in that situation, and he was highly supportive, if you like, of what the claimant had done in the circumstances, and so she wasn't contributory negligent in our view.
So, Alan, you are encouraging people to report incidents to the police. That can be helpful if they have a personal injury claim, which of course is a civil claim. Although we don't need to wait for the criminal case to have concluded to pursue a personal injury claim, it can be helpful in terms of the evidence that the police have gathered, because usually they're there first on the scene and there can be useful evidence there.
In my experience of catastrophic injury claims, going to a solicitor early is vital, because if there is a valid claim, then you will have a lot of expenses early on in terms of rehabilitation. You'll probably need carers, or orthopaedic experts, physiotherapists, occupational therapists, and this is all very expensive. And so being able to have a source of income through a potential claim run by your solicitor is vital to maximising rehabilitation and then getting that person back on their feet as much as possible.
Alan, do you have many injuries or incidents happening with horses where cars and drivers have been unidentified?
Yeah, absolutely. When vehicles pass too fast or too close to a horse, they might drive on totally unaware that that horse has reacted to the speed and the closeness of the vehicle and end up in a ditch, and the horse could be quite seriously injured. Indeed, the rider could be quite seriously injured as well.
So, yeah, Nathan, are you able
Well, I
to
did a case
explain
like this where a skip lorry drove past a couple of horses that were riding along the verge, and some debris came out of the back of the skip and spooked one of the horses, and they weren't able to actually identify the skip lorry at the time, but it was in a rural area and there weren't many sort of potential culprits, and they eventually did prove that this skip lorry had probably driven along that road at the relevant time, and were able to sue the skip driver, but also they sued the owner of the horse again, which had spooked, although that claim failed, because under the Animals Act, if you know that a horse might act in a certain way in certain circumstances, then you're considered to have voluntarily accepted the risk. And in this particular case, the person who fell off the horse was voluntarily accepting the risk that it might spook if it came across a road situation. So the claim against the owner didn't succeed, but the claim against the skip lorry driver did.
And what if the skip lorry had remained anonymous?
So the government is required to have some arrangement with insurance companies to make sure there is payment for liabilities of untraced drivers, and this is the Untraced Drivers Agreement, which is operated by the Motor Insurers Bureau. So even if you can't identify the driver who was negligent or the vehicle they were in, you can succeed in a claim, but you have to be able to prove that it was a driver of a car on a British road that caused your accident. So you have to have some pretty good contemporaneous evidence of what actually happened. Otherwise, they'll just say, well, you're making this up and you can't prove it.
And that maybe, Alan, is where your app and the reporting, or the BHS app, comes in quite useful, because people report incidents as they happen.
Yeah, and also riders actually using helmet cams to record what's happening on the road. So yeah, there's lots of evidence that can be gathered. We've got an app called the Horse Eye app, and it is important for riders to let us know what's happening and where it's happening. And it doesn't have to be a collision. It can be something where they think, wow, if the circumstances had been different in that case, then I might have been injured or my horse might have been injured. But we know that only 1 in 5 riders report incidents to us. So that 3,400 incidents, times that by 5, and then you've got perhaps what is the realistic figure out there.
Nathan, are you able to tell us a little bit about the obligations or lack of obligations on riders with regards to insurance?
Yeah, of course. Well, there is no obligation on horse riders using the road to be insured, just as there's no obligation on cyclists or scooter riders. But because a horse has the potential to cause quite a lot of damage to other vehicles or pedestrians, it would be mad to go out on the road on a horse without having some third-party liability insurance, because you would be personally liable for any damage that you caused if you haven't got insurance. And one of the advantages of joining the BHS is that you will automatically get £30 million of third-party liability cover.
I've heard, Alan, that electric cars are causing issues for horses and riders on the road.
Well, we decided to do some study into this, and we used the Robert Gordon University up in Aberdeen, that the horse knows that there's an electric vehicle behind them before the rider does. And as the vehicle passes, the rider gets the surprise, and as equestrians will know, the rider gets surprised, the horse jumps as well. And the drivers of electric vehicles, we're saying to them is don't do anything different, 10 miles an hour, 2 metres distance, and just pass a horse as it's advised in the highway code.
So the takeaway from today, I think, is get to know your highway code, and for riders, get familiar with the BHS website and information they have for safety. Alan, Nathan, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.